Did you find?
Well, I got to tell you what a wonderful experience it was to watch that bateau.
Wasn't that neat?
Beat those little tiny waves in the rain across the lake. That was a good experience. And the rain added to the charm of it, didn't it,
It sure did. You know, they made it over in 25 minutes, and they stopped twice for rum on the way. Did you know that?
I was trying to watch them as Calvin and
They had a wee dram of rum.
They almost beat Calvin and I. We ran into a couple of traffic jams on the way over to the Naked Turtle to try to show when they got there, and we watched them, and I think they did very well.
Oh, I do too. It was wonderful. It was a great thing to see, and it was very inspirational. Yeah, and it was a great way to start the weekend.
But I know it was neat for your son, and as long as I live, I will never forget those famous words that he said to his kids. Don't break it. Just swing it lightly. We don't want to break the bottle.
Who said that?
Wow, crash. Pieces of water, of glass flying all around.
It was a wonderful picture that I saw the next day of that
spray. Great photograph in the Press Republican.
Wow, they did a wonderful job.
I
watched them do that, and I didn't see that picture in my mind's eye. I saw it the next day in the paper.
My glasses were so wet by that time. I was holding them in my hand. It was a great occasion. I know it was neat for your son and for the other guys that helped to build it.
You bet. They were so pleased that it all worked out as well, and so many people came to watch the thing happen. I think that's neat. In the rain, there must have been 200 people there, Gordy.
It was great. The media was wonderful to show up on time. There were a couple of stations that were broadcasting it live.
Yeah.
Calvin got some dirt on his brand new tennises.
He did? Oh, they look okay now. He must have cleaned them up, right?
I didn't know what Chris Ortloff was hollering when he was standing in the boat. But I remember some of the comic captions that were put underneath Washington crossing the Delaware, standing up in the boat.
The words that they were supposed to say were huzzah, huzzah, huzzah,
really?
And we were supposed to answer from the shore, but I didn't hear them and they didn't hear us, so
never mind.
It didn't happen.
I saw their lips moving, and that's what really counts. Well, thank you for becoming part of that and part of this whole Battle of Plattsburgh celebration. It's really exciting for us to be here.
It is. It sure is exciting for me too. I get an adrenaline rush when I get going on this thing. It's just neat. Yeah.
And I want you to know the next chapter of this event will be the ceremonies at Riverside Ceremony, where we're standing right now in preparation for that event on 9/9/99 as we celebrate the memory of the Battle of Plattsburgh. It isn't very often that you have a festive occasion in a cemetery, but we're doing it here as we begin our official celebration of the Battle of Plattsburgh on a very auspicious date, 9/9/99 today.
Yeah, it's a bug day, I heard, also with the ordinator, the computers.
Yeah.
Is that true or what?
I haven't turned mine on yet.
Are we really on now, or maybe there's a bug at your TV station? And
these are older cameras. They're covered for Y2K. Bud, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good.
Great to have you with us today. Yes. The last time we saw you was Iberville.
Yeah, was it St. Jean-Baptiste Day? No?
No, it was the festival.
The Symposium of Arts. Yes, in Iberville, yes.
We had a good time that night in Napierville. We went to Iberville on another occasion, and you told me after that you had your friend Clyde Rabideau up north with you, and you went up in the air.
Yeah, Clyde comes over quite a lot, and we have the big festival in St. Jean, which is called the Hot Air Balloon Festival. And Peter was invited, so did Clyde was invited, but Peter couldn't make it, so I had to go up and fly with Clyde Rabideau. It was a great experience.
I'm sorry we missed that.
Yeah, well, you'll be invited next year. It's an annual event.
Is that your first and only balloon ride, or have you done that
no,
before?
I've done that very often. Usually I give up my places to my invited guests, and this year Clyde was invited, and he went up, and he found the experience terrific.
I like it. We all dream about flying, and that experience in a balloon is the next best thing. You just have that great feeling.
Well, I hope you'll be with us next year.
I hope we will be too. It's great to have you down here today, Claude.
I could probably arrange a flight for the media, your TV, so you could go in a basket.
A balloon strong enough to hold both of us?
Well, it depends on the weight. We have to know it in advance so we get a bigger balloon.
As they say in England, about 20 stone between us. Claude, have a great day.
Yes,
thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot.
That was a charming gentleman, Claude Bichon from north of the border, whom we've met before and you'll see many times because we celebrate this triangle of excellence involving Canada and our part of the northeastern United States and Burlington, Vermont. We're here today to begin our celebration of the Battle of Plattsburgh with the Battle of Plattsburgh Commemorative Weekend Graveside Memorial Service in Riverside Cemetery, Plattsburgh, New York. Generally, the road going past this cemetery is a one-way street, but it's two-way because of construction recently. So I wasn't quite sure where we were going to park, but we did find a place, and if our cars aren't towed by the time the cemetery ceremony is finished, that'll be great too. There are a lot of very important personages here, and inside the program, which I'm now reading, it says this ceremony recognizes British and American officers killed in both the land and naval battles in Plattsburgh, September 6th through the 11th, 1814. Today, as part of the program, there'll be opening music and a song that always makes me cry, Amazing Grace, from the Virginia Harmony book. Gerald Tatro will be on the bagpipes. The Plattsburgh State University Cardinal Singers will be here, and they're awesome. Joel and Miano, as a matter of fact, I believe they're either practicing or singing over to our right-hand side now as I look through the trees. There will be invocation by Father Dan Keefe, St. Mary's of the Lake Roman Catholic Church on Cumberland Head. The introduction by our good friend Colonel Fitzenns, who's had a lot to do with retrieving the history of this occasion. Guest speakers will be His Honor Mayor Clyde Rabideau of Plattsburgh, the Honorable Claude Bichon, member of Canadian Parliament, whom we just interviewed a few minutes ago, Thomas McDonough Russell III, whom we've interviewed in the past with these cameras. And then there will be a ceremonial laying of the wreath featuring Mayor Rabideau, Thomas McDonough Russell III, and Claude Bichon. There will be music, a traditional Irish melody called Be Thou My Vision. There'll be a firing party with some good friends of ours who are War of 1812 reenactors, Craig Russell, Matt Russell, Steve Burgess, and Ed Burgess. There will be the traditional and powerful taps. The bugler today will be William Long. There'll be more music, a naval hymn by John Dykes called Almighty Father Strong to Save, and finally the benediction with very Reverend John Sorensen, pastor of Trinity Episcopal Church in Plattsburgh. Inside the program, and if you don't have a copy of it, maybe you can get one of these copies. They are historical in themselves, and they give a little bit of who's buried in this cemetery, and there were lots of people, as you might imagine, connected with the Battle of Plattsburgh and War of 1812. The battle itself was fought on the morning of September 11th, 1814. Thanks to all the people who are participating here today, not just the people who showed up to watch, history buffs and local citizens, little children, what a great way to learn history by being part of it, and senior citizens as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Monsieur Rochon, welcome to our third annual ceremony to commemorate the Battle of Plattsburgh, which happened on September the 11th, 1814. I'd like to begin the ceremonies today with a musical rendition of Amazing Grace. This is the regimental song of the 2nd Dragoon Guards of England. We will now have the invocation by Father O'Keefe.
Let us pray. Generous God, we call on you this special day, the 9th day of the 9th month of the 99th year of this 20th century. Almost exactly 185 years ago, a fierce battle took place on Lake Champlain, not many miles from this site. How significant that combatants from both sides are buried in this cemetery. American and British soldiers and sailors, enemies in battle, lying beside one another after too short a life. Bless them, God, their bravery and their dedication. This forgiving and forgetting is part of the American makeup. We have followed this pattern of helping countries and peoples we have defeated in war, helping them to rebuild and become again members of the family of nations. This generosity was especially true after World War II, and even after the Vietnam War, where in fact we were not the victor. But Lord, help us not to so glorify wars and battles of the past that we think of conflict first when we are up against those who disagree with us. War has changed. One bomb can now destroy a whole city. Lord, bless us with the wisdom that comes with age and experience. May we be forever grateful to these brave and generous soldiers and sailors. Perhaps they, more than others, can teach us the value of human life on both sides of conflict. What greater tribute to them if we have learned not to kill one another, but have learned to compromise, tolerate, accommodate, and live together on this planet which you, O God, have given to all of us to be our home. Wouldn't it be better to be side by side in peace and understanding than to be side by side in graves? We pray in your name. Amen.
Let me take a few minutes to tell you a little known story about this battle. When the British crossed the border to invade the United States on September the 1st, 1814, they did not encounter any American troops at all. There was no one at the border. And in fact, it won't be until the 5th that they see their first troops. At least they think that's when they saw them first. But in reality, there was a lieutenant by the name of Roswell Waite, who was in the New York Dragoons, and the New York Dragoons wore red uniforms and British helmets. And you couldn't tell them from the British at all. And since the British force that was here had never really fought together, they had been brought from France, from England, and from Ireland. They were unfamiliar with the various formations. And so when Lieutenant Waite and Lieutenant Standish appeared behind British lines to reconnoiter and provide intelligence on the 4th, they didn't know they were there. And these two young, brave lieutenants of the New York militia wandered around behind the lines on horseback, taking notes, trying to speak with a good British accent so no one would give them away, and they returned to American lines that evening. So by the night of the 5th, when the British got their first American contact, and that is when Lieutenant Waite and Standish attacked with 2 troops of cavalry, the British had been scouted, and their pickets were run off, and the American cavalry attacked them. They were repulsed shortly thereafter, but that was really the first contact. Little did they know how well these lieutenants knew the formations they were attacking that day. More significantly, perhaps, Captain Waite, 15 or more years later, came back here to Plattsburgh, and he was the commanding officer of the garrison. Captain Downey, the British naval commander, had been buried here shortly after the battle. It was Lieutenant Waite, now Captain Waite, who went around this area all the way up north of Chazy where the first contact was made, because after all, he made the first contact. He found the graves of those who had fallen, both British and American, on those days, and he had them exhumed. Other graves here in town that he could locate, and all those bodies were brought by the captain here, and this is how this cemetery was formed. I've seen a drawing recently of the cemetery about 15 years after it was in place. There's no houses, there's no trees, and there are many more graves than are here today. So there are some lost graves here as well. There were 2 more rows of stones behind this. Interesting, too, is the fact that Midshipman Baldwin is buried there, who's an American midshipman. And it says in your program that he actually died in New York City of wounds a few years later. Further research has shown that indeed he didn't die of wounds. He was promoted several years later to lieutenant. We found some Navy documents, and he lived on. So the question is, do we have an unknown soldier or sailor buried here under Baldwin's stone? I think we do. Now I'd like to introduce the mayor of Plattsburgh, who has done so much to start this whole thing rolling. 3 years ago, it was his idea that began the Interpretive Center. It was his idea that brought us here to the cemetery. And I think we should all give a round of applause as Mayor Claude Revenue speaks.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a tremendous pleasure to be here among your company. I look out on this audience and I see so many committed people, so many volunteers, so many people interested in preserving our tremendous heritage and the legacy here in Plattsburgh, New York. And we're here for good reasons. It's, of course, the right thing to do. This battle, of course, can be called a metaphor for what we ought to do, and because it is Plattsburgh. And when we say it's the right thing to do, one need only look to my right at men and women who served our country, who actually fought in battles, who know what it is to die, to fight, to risk one's life for their country, for freedom, for liberty, for America. And to have these people here, these veterans of American wars, is a blessing and it's an honor to us all that they are here to share the solemnity of this evening. We talked a little bit about a metaphor, because this cemetery has within it soldiers from both sides of a conflict, nations that have come together as allies in the years and the generations hence to do the right thing, to fight again for liberty and for freedom across this world. We are friends today, something that we ought to always remember that can happen when people cooperate and we set aside our differences. We're here because it's also Plattsburgh. This is such a unique facet of American history that happened right here. I was in Maine not long ago on a vacation. I picked up a book out of one of these bed and breakfast places. They have a little bookcase there. It was a history of America, shown in 350 pictures. And of course, one of those pictures was the Battle of Plattsburgh. Of all the significant events that have happened in our nation's history, Plattsburgh is mentioned. At a place that I attended, West Point, New York, and Cannon Hall, all the great battles. And I was a plebe walking in there, and I looked up and I saw the battles, the great battles that America has fought. And among those 20 or so battles, signified in that great hollowed hall was the Battle of Plattsburgh. And of course I turned to my squad mates and said, hey, that's where I'm from. This is good. It's Plattsburgh. And now that we have so many people that are committed and are interested in preserving this history and legacy and are building up with great momentum that you'll see so much of in this coming weekend, and so many more weekends to come in these grand September weekends that are sure to bless again Plattsburgh, you will see more and more people come to recognize and appreciate what happened here in this hallowed ground when townspeople, civilians, joined with militia and regular army to defend the United States of America on land and on sea, preserving peace, preserving liberty, preserving United States soil, and again, joining hands with those people that we fought again as allies years later. So uniquely Plattsburgh. We're here because it's the right thing. We're here because of the solemnity of the occasion and of the metaphor for life that we show so much appreciation for. And we're here because it's Plattsburgh. God bless you all. It's a great weekend, and it's a great time to be from Plattsburgh. Thank you.
The War of 1812, they say there was no winners, that it was a stalemate after 2.5 years of bloody conflict. But indeed, I believe there really was a winner, and the winner was Canada. At this time, Canada had been a colony, as we had been, of Great Britain. But when she was threatened in 1812 with American invasion, in fact 1812, 1813, and 1814, we invaded Canada unsuccessfully because the Canadians fought, not just the British regular army that was there, but the Canadian fencibles were in the line. The Canadian chasseurs, the Canadian voltigeurs were also here, and de Meuron's Swiss, French-speaking infantry unit that was here as well, came along with the British forces. In fact, they were in the lead in the attack that came down the road near the ferry and across the edge of Plattsburgh Bay and right into town on the north edge. And they claimed that they're the ones that cleared the Americans out of the town on the 6th. Every one, they say, was cleared by them. With that in mind, it's a great pleasure that we have here with us today a member of the Canadian Parliament, Claude Beauchamp. Monsieur, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank my friend Clyde Rabideau, who invited me today for this ceremony. It's very important for me to come over here because, of course, there was a big battle in Plattsburgh. Indeed, Commander MacDonough defeated the British fleet and the British troops here, and defeated General Prevost and Captain Downey, that even died here and is buried here today. Of course, these people then were doing the best for a better future for the future generations. And I just want to remind you also that 40 years before that, there was another battle in Saint-Jean in my own writing, where the American troops tried to invade which was then the British colony, which it was in Saint-Jean. And there was a siege in Saint-Jean, 49 days of the fort of Saint-Jean. The Americans took the fort after 49 days, but the winter was then so close that they had to turn back and go back. So this is why today we are Canadian citizens. We could have been American citizens if the fort had fallen earlier. Just wanted to tell you that because it's important. I think that now we're in a tie now. We each have one victory and one defeat, and I think it will remain like that. These are lessons from the past. And these are facts from the past. But we're in another war now. It's a war for prosperity. And it's a worldwide war. It's very important for us in Saint-Jean, with our friends here in Plattsburgh and our friends in Burlington, to fight together and to tighten our relationships together. Because I think in the 21st century, the history books will be taking a look at what went on now. And we're doing our best also for the better for the future generations. That's why I think that we have to be very close to one another. I mean, there's a lot of place on earth where people can manage to go and have industries there. I think the best place on earth to do that is in a triangle between Burlington, Plattsburgh, and Saint-Jean. So we'll have to work together now, and I think, I have no doubt in my mind, that we'll be victorious of that. And we'll be prosperous, and our future generations will be prosperous. And we'll never forget about these battles, the one in Plattsburgh, the one in Saint-Jean, and the one that will be united us together, the one with Burlington, Plattsburgh, and Saint-Jean all together against the rest of the world, so that we have a prosperous future. So thank you a lot, Clyde, for your invitation, and it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Winston Churchill wrote in the history of the English-speaking peoples that the Battle of Plattsburgh was the greatest battle of the War of 1812. The British didn't write very much more about it than that. It was Thomas MacDonough who defeated them here on the lake. And Churchill said just one thing more. He said that the reason that the British lost was because they were used to fighting on the open sea in blue water with big ships, deep draft. And here on this inland lake, their ships were not equipped to fight against the American shallow draft vessels. He didn't quite do his research because 2 of his 4 ships were captured American vessels that he used in this battle. So he was only half right when he said they didn't have the right ships. McDonough pulled off a great victory because of his knowledge of military history and how to use his fleet against the British who had fought before at anchor. He was a great sailor. He is succeeded by another great sailor who is with us here today. Thomas McDonough Russell was a member of the most elite of the U.S. Navy, that is the silent service, the submarines. He spent over 20 years in the United States Navy and has gone on to a distinguished career after that as well. Thomas McDonough Russell, please.
Mayor Rabideau, Monsieur Beauchamp, Member of Parliament Saint-Jean, Colonel Fitzenns, Commemoration Chairman Booth, distinguished guests, families, and friends. It's my distinct pleasure to be here in Plattsburgh today to take part in this Battle of Plattsburgh commemoration, and especially this memorial service in recognition of those who fought and died in that battle. I come as a 5th-generation descendant of Commodore Thomas McDonough and am proud to bear his name. As a boy, the knowledge of Commodore McDonough was common to our family and was accepted without much fanfare. His hat and spyglass were on a wall in Dad's den, and his portrait hung in the dining room. It wasn't until recent years that I read more about his life and of the battle, finally realizing that this was a very special man. It was with great humility that I attended last year's service here and could really connect with who McDonough was, what he did, and what he stood for. In speaking to you today, I had wanted to recognize his courage and his compassion. However, in rereading an account of the Commodore's funeral in a framed clipping from that day's Middletown Gazette, I found just the words. They were from an address given by the Reverend Mr. Colton to the cadets of the American Literary, Scientific, and Military Academy of Middletown, all of whom participated in the funeral procession and burial on December 5th, 1825. I read, "True courage is the most sublime passion of which the human soul is capable. It is a calm, unreserved surrender of ourselves to the mighty event before us. It is an unshrinking, uncompromising, unquestioning devotion to the dread, inscrutable issue. It differs most essentially from that blind, reckless exposure to life so frequently and falsely termed courage, which may belong, in as eminent a degree, to the man who leaps from the precipice as to him who dies in battle. True courage is not indifferent to consequences. The sacrifice must not transcend its object. All the circumstances which predict success or failure are held in luminous survey until the calm, collected judgment of the man determines, and then action alone prevails." Such was the courage of McDonough on the perilous edge of battle. When the sound of preparation had died away into that suspense where men are pinched for breath and expectation becomes agony, he appeared tranquil as one unalterably fixed. And during the doubtful conflict, he made none of those blind, headlong movements which indicate the presence of a desperate ambition or the want of capacity. He went to the work like a man penetrated with a deep sense of duty, not at liberty to act otherwise, unconcerned what might become of himself, anxious only to answer the claims of his country, his conscience, and his God. When silence from the deck told that the work of death was done, then the sternness of the commander gave way to the sensibilities of the man, and he wept over the fallen brave. His generous pity overflowed in acts of attention to the bleeding enemy. He no longer regarded them as foes, but as sufferers, whom the irresistible impulse of his heart led him to relieve. That bitter hostility to the resisting or conquered enemy, which has sadly tarnished the luster of many a hero, found no place in the breast of MacDonough. He regarded the enemy as men whom the deplorable circumstances of war had arrayed against his country, and while it was his duty to oppose the destructive urgency of their movements, he would not for a moment harbor a feeling that would triumph in the destruction of an individual. His kind offices to the wounded captive will long be remembered by those who encountered him, and many a rough Canadian heart will weep at the story of his death. Were all who engage in war to possess the spirit of MacDonough, the gorgon of death would lose half its horrors. Would that we could speak with words such as those. In closing, and as we're gathered here now, I would ask that during this service you include in your remembrances the hero of Champlain, Commodore Thomas MacDonough, as he rests with his wife Anne beneath a marble monument in Riverside Cemetery, Middletown, Connecticut, the home of his choice. And may I also clarify that it is my son, Thomas IV, here with us today, who cares for and maintains this plot and monument in the memory of and respect for his heroic ancestor. It is our dearest wish that at some time in the appropriate future, a contingent of militia and citizens from Plattsburgh would journey to Middletown to join us in a service such as this for the courageous and compassionate man who literally ended the War of 1812. Thank you, and God bless you.
All please rise. The chorus will now sing, Be Thou My Vision.
Guard. Footage. Hut. Present. Huh.
Check ready. Present. Fire.
cartwheel, 1. Oh, there down, shake. Order your parallel. Order. Huh. Stand at. He.
We'll now have the music. Almighty Father, strong to save, known to us as the Navy hymn. I'd like to ask the Very Reverend Sorensen to give us the benediction.
Let us pray. Eternal God, Judge of the nations, in whose perfect kingdom no sword is drawn but the sword of righteousness, we have gathered today to honor the lives of these your children who lost their lives on land and sea in the Battle of Plattsburgh. We honor each of them who in those days of decision ventured much for the liberties we now enjoy. Help us to respect their sacrifice by how we live our lives. Unite the people of this earth in bonds of love, that we may find a lasting peace on this fragile earth, our island home. Amen.
Before we leave here today, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming, and let's not forget those men and women who serve in the armed forces all over the world today. Thank you.
We're going to do that picture. Thank you.
Oh, what a great occasion it is, and how great it is to have you back here with the anchor already on dry ground.
I know it. It's our pleasure. And a bateau in the water.
And a bateau in the water, and they found remnants of another bateau and another gig, and I don't know where we go from here.
Well, it was interesting. It was only 2.5 weeks ago that we journeyed up. Tommy and I journeyed up to Albany, and with Chris Ortloff, and we were at the governor's signing of the legislation for the dedication of the day.
Every one of these
Incredible.
things is a tremendous high for me because we celebrate our history, and I know you do too because you're such a part of it via your bloodline, whether you like it or not. But I got to tell you that I don't know how you found that in that newspaper, but that was a very, very impressive piece of prose.
Well, you know, it's been hanging in my den for 26 years.
Come on.
And
It's about time you shared it with the rest of the world.
I had read bits of it before, and I knew there was this talk. And so when I was putting things together, I said, let me just take a look. And when I got to the point where it said, courage is, and it went on from there, I said, there is the meat of the message.
Wow, what a powerful, powerful description. And why don't they write like that in newspapers anymore, do they?
We've lost that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Whatever happened to the spyglass that you were telling us about? Have you still got it?
The spyglass will be on display this evening at Chris's dinner.
How about that? You brought it with you?
Brought it with us, and plus we brought the pieces that we had for the governor in Albany that we brought up. McDonough's handwritten autobiography. The silver slop jar from the tea service that was given to him by the General Assembly of the state of Delaware, which was his home state originally. And we have a framed letter to the commanding officer of the British group in April for exchange of prisoners from a small fight. You remember that they had earlier on? And there are a couple of other pieces. There's a small oil painting of McDonough that we brought. So
How great it is for us to have you here, but I know it's a kick for you. I can tell the way you stood up there.
Well,
you're just overcome with the emotion of it all, and it's beautiful.
Well, the thing is, too, you see, there's a lot of connection because with a 20-year Navy career.
Oh, I know.
You know, there's a great connection. Plus, my family and my brother, were present at Boston Navy Yard when they commissioned the McDonough DLG-9.
I didn't know
that was exciting. Well, my grandfather was there for the McDonough DD 2-something, which was lost, unfortunately, in the very end of World War II in a typhoon off the Philippines. I don't know if you remember, we lost a few ships being rolled over in that typhoon. She was lost. But there's a lot of history down there. You see, my grandfather was the first Thomas McDonough Russell. And he was the one that pulled together so many things, found pieces and bits that were in libraries or with other people, and brought this in and made the name stand out in our family.
Yeah, and I didn't realize when McDonough died until you read that article today.
Yes, he died.
He was a fairly young man.
Yes,
he was young. He was only in his 20s when this battle was.
Well, from what I read, there was illness, unknown illness on the lake, cold, damp, this, that, and the other, and I see tuberculosis.
Really?
And I think he carried it with him. It finally caught up with him in the Mediterranean in the fall of 1825. And at the time, he was in command of the Constitution. He was the 12th commanding officer of the Constitution. And he got transferred to another ship that was coming back to the States because he was afraid that he wasn't going to make it back. And as it so happened, he died at sea a couple of 100 miles off of New York. They brought him into New York, and then he was brought up on a steam ferry from New York up the Connecticut River to Middletown. And the whole thing went from there. It was,
it's amazing, and we learn more every year.
Oh, I know, because it comes out of the woodwork.
Yeah, we try to investigate those little nooks and crannies in the woodwork, and we've learned a lot of things ourselves.
Well, last year, I think you'll remember that Isabel McDonough Vercart was here. And I just talked to her 3 days ago in South Carolina, and she had a tough year with her husband, kidney disease, and just very difficult. So she couldn't make it. She was invited but couldn't make it. But they're moving to Maine and will only be 200 miles away. So I expect to see her. He's a pretty spry 84, and see her.
That's really great. And besides all that, how's the racing season been? Have you been involved?
Well, not really.
You haven't?
But no, you see, after we sold the sail loft back in 1984, we were sort of out of boats for a while. So we've done some sailing here. The sailing this year was 10 days in the Virgin Islands with our daughter and her husband.
You know, that's not a bad plan.
Bareboat chartering there was great. But interestingly, along the McDonough thing, we're just getting started now to dig into the internet, to start to look down the genealogical lines and see which other descendants
What a
we
party
can
that'll
find.
be, huh?
Well, it would be interesting because they've sort of branched off and they go, and some forget or some never knew. And it could be very interesting.
I'm sure many of them out there have no idea what we're doing here, and we'd love to bring them into the fold, wouldn't we?
The exciting thing is it's going on toward the bicentennial, and it's just growing every year and every. The governor was very interested in the quest. He said, Chris, that's really interesting. I'm very interested in that. How much do you think the Saratoga would cost?
Oh, magic words.
Chris said, well, probably $7 to $9 million. And the governor said, well, I guess that's a little too much for us, but I'm sure that we could help out. So he thought it was a grand idea. Who knows?
Well, you know, if 1/3 of Chris's dream for this area out there by the old Plattsburgh Air Force Base, it comes to fruition, this will be something for everybody in the country and many other countries
it's
to enjoy.
absolutely true.
Years to come.
Absolutely true. And because, unfortunately, Lake Champlain is still an unknown destination to most of the United States. I know it. And it's a jewel.
We've called this whole region a sleeping giant for so long. Calvin and I have tried via this little program to spread the word, but it only goes out so many miles.
Well,
but I think the word will spread.
Good.
I think that day in Albany and this day today and every year I can see it grow.
Little
it's
by little.
Great to have you and your family a big part of it.
Well, we're delighted, just delighted. It's made it come alive for us.
Tom, thanks again for being here
pleasure.
today.
My pleasure. Good to see you again.
Tom? Yes, there is another side to Assemblyman Chris Orloff, a side other than the one we saw fading into the misty sunset aboard the Bateau the other day.
Cleaned up, dried out a little bit.
But was that fun?
Well, it was fun. I hope you get a chance to take the camera, you and Calvin both, and ride in that with 6 men rowing. And remember, they haven't even really trained yet. They were going so fast, I thought you could pull a 80-pound water
teach you
skier
to stand
behind
up
that
in a boat.
Really, it rides very well. It's a tremendous boat, and I guarantee you when they've trained together, they can probably put 2 or 3 more knots onto that thing.
We were on the other end of the line. We snuck aboard the Juniper. Somebody called Frank, and he came running down to see who was aboard his boat. But the camera was already suffering from a lot of moisture inside, and we thought we'd just get under the eaves a little bit and watch them come in. And it was great to see them come into view and then come across. Every little chapter adds a little zest to this whole celebration, doesn't it? Huh?
I think you've touched on what's so great about this is because there are so many little chapters, and there's so many ways that people can participate in their own, following their own interests and their own heart and in their own time. From school children who did the poster contest that is on the button this year, to Kit Booth, who's retired and carved the rooster on the boat, to the more able-bodied folks. And I want to say this too: a couple of women asked me, when you get to the next boat, are women going to be allowed to work on it? Well, of course they are. It's just pure coincidence that the 6 people who built the rooster were all men, and women are welcome.
But what an experience for those guys to watch that happen from I love to see things develop from a dream. And we were just talking with Tom McDonough Russell, and how and what an important day that was in Albany not very long ago when we signed that official document.
Well, it was,
and how interested our governor is in this whole plan, to the point where he wanted to know how much the replica of the Saratoga would cost.
Well, it was true. If he told you that Governor Pataki moved up the ladder of interest 3 or 4 rungs that day, I think there's no question but what he did. And we are in the process of trying to get the videotape of the entire ceremony for you folks, and I thought we'd have it by this week, but they get busy down there in the governor's office.
I got to tell you, the rain added to the fun of that launching of the bateau. As W.C. Fields would have said, how fortuitous it was for parts of the old bateau and that next boat to be found just a few weeks before this celebration to generate a more and more local interest, because, you know, once we get the local populace interested and truly excited about your dream, then I think we've got a chance to expand it far and wide.
That got us a lot of news coverage across the state, the bateau. Yep. And interestingly, I was
on the website. What a great website.
I was actually, you're right about the State Museum's website. I was surprised that the Battle of Plattsburgh Day legislation got statewide press as well. We really didn't do it for that immediate. We did it so that in the future we could promote the event and say it is an official day of commemoration in New York State. I think that adds a lot, and that was our purpose. But I was very surprised the Associated Press ran a story about the bill signing that ran in almost every paper in the state. That's the kind of serendipity. Serendipity.
There's that good word again.
Unexpected good consequences of what you're doing, and this project is just full of it. Full of it.
Oh, it's going great. And this day, this was an awesome day to be a part of. Hopefully the people can enjoy it in a secondary way, but those of us who were here were very moved. Very moved.
I was moved, and so indeed was Tom Russell.
Oh my, isn't it great?
You can tell you have good material when the speaker even chokes up.
He is so into this thing. I mean, you know, he was 20 years in the Navy. This is a really important thing for him.
Indeed.
And
Indeed
I understand he brought the McDonough spyglass with him. Did you know that?
He told me he was bringing some things, and he didn't say
some other
what,
things which
so
you
I've
may
got some
see at your little
surprises in
party
store.
tonight.
Maybe so, I hope.
Not surprises anymore because you got the big mouth standing next to you, but it's great to have him here.
Wonderful.
And have
Yes,
him
it
join
is.
in this celebration.
And their whole family, and we will, as he asked for us to come down to Middletown to observe Commodore
I can't wait for
McDonough's. We will do that. It's been a long time coming, and we should do it. We will do it.
I think that's great. Chris, thanks again.
You're welcome.
Best
Gordon.
of luck.
Thanks, Calvert.
Well, the afternoon is waning, and some of the people have already left the ceremony, but we're here standing with very smartly dressed Jim Bailey, who is the city historian. That was quite an impressive service today, wasn't it?
It was very impressive. It was fascinating to listen to Colonel Fitzsimmons' little tidbits that we've never heard of before.
He always manages to come up with some new stuff, doesn't he?
Always new. It's amazing with him. And both of the speakers also gave us some interesting aspects of the battle that I had not heard of, and of our Canadian relations. It's all very interesting. Excellent service, and it's hard to think how we'll top it again next year. So.
We've got to work ourselves up to the year 2014 for the big celebration.
Right. We've got to keep going onward and upward. But I think it's appropriate that we do this each year, and it's excellent. It does my heart good to see people here in the cemetery, particularly in the old part, because we all tend to look at the stones that are around us, and I think it's. Maybe some people would think it's morbid, but I'm fascinated.
I don't. I, as I mentioned very early, and as I started to record this program, Calvin and I, about an hour ago, I said it seems strange to have a festive occasion in a cemetery, But it's amazing. I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of my time looking around old cemeteries.
Exactly.
And I really love it. That's how you learn the real history.
Yeah, that's exactly it. A cemetery is history, and it's your community's history, and that's the place to go. Actually, if you want to know the history of any community. Yeah.
And I'm sure that many of the viewers of this little program were not aware that soldiers from both sides in the Battle of Plattsburgh are buried right here on these grounds.
That's true. That's true, and it's quite remarkable that this cemetery developed from essentially from those military burials, as Colonel Fitzinn said, and I'm going to go looking at those maps that he's been looking at.
I don't know where he digs this stuff up. And I don't know how he found out that there were, what did he say, 2 more rows of graves that we didn't know about?
Yeah. So
you got another mystery, Jim.
I've got to look more. It's a great start to the weekend. I think it's excellent.
It's got to be especially pleasing for you as a historian to see this many people interested, so many people to come out today.
Right, and we hope that's one aspect we can develop, and I think it will happen with your publicity. That in the future we'll get bigger crowds, bigger and bigger, working up till filling the whole cemetery.
Who knows what's going to happen next? Jim, thanks a lot for all of your help.
Thank you.
All you do to preserve the history of this great city.
Thank you.
That's city historian Jim Bailey speaking with us today. What a kick it's been to be here with all these important people of the present and the past. Before this series of programs on the Battle of Plattsburgh and the War of 1812 is completed in 1999, we will have taken you with this camera on Calvin's shoulder aboard the good ship Juniper across to Crab Island, where there will be a celebration several days after this event, which we're recording on the 9th. We will take you to Dewey's Tavern, give you the significance as we have in programs past. If you're a fan of our little corner, its place in the history in the Battle of Plattsburgh and the War of 1812. And in between, who knows how many stones we will uncover. And I'm not speaking about this cemetery, but little tidbits of the past that you may never have heard before. News to you and me and Calvin and the whole North Country. What is the good news is that people are finally catching on to history, and that pleases us greatly. And yes, I think I know where we will be next time for our